The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen as I flipped the last pancake onto my husband's plate. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the polished countertops. He sat at the table scrolling through his phone, dressed in his usual crisp shirt and navy tie, always put together, always in control. I placed his plate in front of him and he looked up, flashing that familiar smile. "You're spoiling me," he said, cutting into his food. I shrugged, leaning against the counter watching him eat. Moments like this felt ordinary, comforting. Before leaving, he pulled me in, pressing a lingering kiss against my lips. "I'll call you later," he promised, grabbing his briefcase. Then just like that he was gone, his car pulling out of the driveway as I started clearing the table. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Your husband isn't who you think he is. I can prove it." My heart skipped. I stared at the screen, a cold weight settling in my stomach. Spam? A joke? My fingers hovered over the delete button, but I couldn't do it. Something about those words felt deliberate, calculated. I put the phone down, trying to shake the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. But the seed had been planted, and no matter how much I wanted to ignore it, doubt had already taken root. The message haunted me all morning, but I forced myself to push it aside. I went through the motions, laundry, emails, errands, but my mind kept circling back. He had promised to call. By noon my phone was still silent. I texted him a casual busy day, but got no response. Strange. He never ignored my messages. In the afternoon my younger sister called, chatting about nothing in particular until she casually mentioned seeing my husband's car near the west side of town. My stomach clenched. He was supposed to be across the city in meetings. I kept my voice steady, acting uninterested, but my hands trembled when I hung up. That evening when he walked through the door I studied him carefully. He kissed my cheek, smiled like always, but something felt off. When I asked about his day, his answers were vague, his words clipped, like he was carefully choosing what to say. Later as he showered I checked his suit jacket. A crumpled receipt from a cafe. 2 drinks, 2 meals at the same time he was supposedly in a meeting. I put everything back, forced a smile when he returned. But deep inside I already knew something wasn't right. I needed to prove myself wrong, to shake off the doubt poisoning my mind. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe the message was just a cruel joke. Maybe the receipt meant nothing. So I did what any loving wife would. I set the table, lit candles, and made his favorite dinner. When he walked in he seemed surprised, then smiled. "What's all this?" His voice was warm, but his eyes flickered with something I couldn't place. I shrugged, playing it off. "Just wanted to do something nice." He pulled me close, kissed my forehead, and murmured, "You're incredible." We ate, we talked, we laughed, almost like normal. But something had shifted. I watched him too closely, searched his face for cracks, for signs of guilt. He leaned over after dinner, tucking my hair behind my ear, pressing his lips softly against mine. I closed my eyes, willing myself to feel what I used to. But there was nothing. No warmth, no connection. Just emptiness. As he pulled away, smiling like nothing had changed, I thought about the message. It echoed in my mind louder than ever. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Doubt had turned into obsession. I couldn't push it aside anymore. That message wasn't random, and my gut told me I was missing something big. I called my sister, kept my voice casual, but my request was anything but normal. "Can you trace a number for me?" She hesitated, then agreed. I didn't tell her why. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Later that day I met his best friend for coffee. He was nervous, shifting in his seat, glancing at his watch too often. "How's work?" I asked, watching his reaction. He tensed before forcing a smile. "Same as always." "Liar." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "I know something's going on." He shook his head, chuckling awkwardly. "You're imagining things." But his eyes gave him away. He wasn't just hiding something, he was terrified I'd find out. That night my husband texted he'd be late. No explanation, no apology. Just, "Don't wait up." My stomach twisted. This was it. I needed to know the truth. For the first time the thought entered my mind like a whisper I couldn't ignore. "Follow him. See for yourself." I parked across the street, hands gripping the wheel, heart pounding in my chest. The cafe was small, dimly lit, the kind of place where people had quiet conversations they didn't want overheard. And there he was, sitting at a table near the window, leaning slightly forward, speaking to a woman I didn't recognize. She was polished, professional, her expression unreadable. Their conversation looked serious but not intimate. No touching, no laughter, no obvious signs of something more. My breath came out in a shaky sigh. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I had let that message twist reality into something it wasn't. I got out of the car and walked toward the entrance, timing it perfectly. The door swung open just as he stepped outside. His eyes widened for a split second before his face softened into a smile. "What are you doing here?" I laughed lightly. "Just grabbing coffee." "What about you?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Business meeting." His arm slid around my waist, his lips brushing against mine in an effortless kiss. I closed my eyes, waiting for that familiar warmth. But it wasn't there. Just like last time. And suddenly I knew I wasn't wrong. I couldn't let it go. That empty kiss, the hesitation in his voice. It wasn't just my imagination. I needed proof. I spent the next day searching, looking for anything that felt out of place. Then my sister called. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "I found him. The guy who texted you." My pulse quickened. "Who is he?" "Boz. A former colleague of your husband. He says you're not the only one being lied to." My fingers tightened around the phone. "What does that mean?" She exhaled. "He wouldn't say. Just that he's scared. That whatever your husband is hiding, it's bigger than you think." I hung up, my body buzzing with nervous energy. If I couldn't get answers from him, I'd find them myself. I searched his office, checking drawers, folders. Nothing. Then inside an old wallet shoved in the back of a cabinet, I found it. A bank card I'd never seen before. I pulled up the account on my laptop. Transactions, payments. Large sums transferred every month to a name I didn't recognize. My chest tightened. This wasn't dinner with a coworker. This was something else. And he had been hiding it for a long time. I needed answers. I found her easily. Her name was on the receipt, and a quick search led me to her work profile. A corporate consultant. No personal ties to my husband, at least none that I could see. I called her office, pretending to be a client, and within an hour I was sitting across from her in a quiet cafe. She looked surprised but composed, setting her coffee down with a measured smile. "I assume this isn't about business." I didn't waste time. "How do you know my husband?" She tilted her head, studying me. "We work together. He's been dealing with a lot lately." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Stress. Fatigue. Marriage problems." My stomach lurched. "He told you that?" She nodded, almost sympathetic. "He talks about feeling distant from you. That things aren't the same." I couldn't breathe. He wasn't just lying, he was confiding in someone else. Sharing our problems with a stranger. That betrayal cut deeper than anything. Because if he was telling her this, what else was he saying behind my back? I couldn't keep waiting for the truth to come to me. If he was hiding something, I needed to see it with my own eyes. That morning, I drove to his office unannounced, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I told myself I was overreacting, that I'd find him working, that the doubts in my head were nothing but paranoia. But as I stepped into the lobby, something inside me already knew, I wasn't going to like what I found. The elevator doors slid open and I walked toward his office, heels clicking against the polished floors. His door was ajar. I heard voices, his and hers. My heart pounded as I stepped closer. Laughing. Low murmurs. Then I saw them. She was leaning against his desk, too close. He was standing between her and the window, his body angled toward hers. The way he looked at her, the way she touched his arm, it was different from what I'd seen before. And then, just as I told myself I had to be imagining it, he kissed her. Time stopped. He must have felt my presence because he turned. Our eyes met. Shock flickered across his face, but he didn't move. He didn't step back. He didn't call my name. He just stood there. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a scene. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked out. And he let me go. He came home late, the sound of his keys rattling in the lock breaking the silence. I was already sitting in the living room, waiting. He looked at me, exhaled, ran a hand through his hair like a man carrying the weight of a mistake he didn't know how to undo. "It wasn't what it looked like," he started, stepping closer, voice careful, measured. "It was nothing. A stupid moment. I swear." I didn't respond, just studied him, letting the silence stretch. He took that as hesitation, as a chance. "It didn't mean anything," he pushed. desperation creeping into his tone. I love you. I almost laughed at how easily the words left his mouth. Instead, I just nodded, pretending to consider. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my best friend. A video. My stomach dropped. I pressed play. Different day. Same woman. His hands weren't just touching her arm this time. I stood up, grabbed my bag. He stepped forward, panicked. Wait. But I was already walking to the door, already gone. And this time he knew he couldn't stop me. I didn't leave because of one mistake. I left because the life I thought I had never existed. The man I loved wasn't real, just a carefully crafted illusion, a version of himself he let me believe in. He begged, his voice raw, desperate. Please don't do this. We can fix it. But there was nothing left to fix. I stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, watching as he reached for me like he still had the power to pull me back. But his grip on me was gone. It wasn't just her, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. It was everything. The lies. The secrets. The way you let me believe we were something we weren't. He shook his head, eyes pleading. I love you. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this. I stepped outside, the cold air biting against my skin. Behind me, the house that had once been home now felt foreign. I turned back only once. He stood at the window watching. Silent. Defeated. I didn't wave, didn't hesitate. I just walked away, knowing there was no way back.